There's a dog that most people have never heard of. Yet it lives inside the genetics of two of the most recognizable breeds on the planet. It stood at the highest peaks of Europe, guarded mountain passes against wolves and bandits, and was once exhibited in Liverpool as the largest dog in England. And then, quietly, it was bred out of existence. This is the unique story of the Alpine Mastiff. Before we had the St. Bernard, and before we had the modern English Mastiff as we know it today, there was something older. A massive, brindle-coated Molosser type that had been working the high passes of the Swiss and Italian Alps since before anyone recorded their existence properly. The Alpine Mastiff wasn't a breed in the way we'd recognize the term. There were no kennel clubs, stud books, or formal breed standards. It was more of a land race, a population of working dogs shaped by the mountains themselves, by altitude and cold and the specific demands of a life spent guarding livestock across terrain where a wrong step could kill you instantly. Their fur has been described as brown and white, like modern St. Bernards, and also completely brindle like modern Mastiffs. One thing is for sure, these dogs were enormous. Contemporary accounts and early 19th century natural history sources describe animals standing somewhere between 35 and 40 inches at the shoulder, with weights to match. Some information online suggests weights up to 350 pounds. However, I would expect these to be exaggerated as part of their legend. More likely, they were well above 100 pounds easily, like today's Mastiff breeds. That still puts them in the same category in terms of sheer scale as the Tibetan Mastiff and the Caucasian Shepherd of today, two of the other great mountain guardian traditions of the ancient world. And this wasn't an accident. These dogs needed to be big, as the threats they faced were very real. Wolves were common throughout the Alps well into the modern period, and a dog guarding a flock in a remote valley needed to be able to handle that confrontation without human backup. Size, courage, and a certain self-reliant intelligence were the job requirements, and the Alpine Mastiff had all three. Their connection to the Great St. Bernard Pass is where most people encounter the breed, even if they don't realize it. The Hospice at the summit of that pass, perched nearly 8,000 feet up on the route between Switzerland and Italy, began keeping large Molosser-type dogs sometime in the second half of the 17th century. Initially, they were watchdogs, guards against the harsh conditions and the occasional brigand. But by around 1700, something shifted. The monks started deploying them in organized rescue patrols after snowstorms, sending them out in pairs to search for travelers, buried in avalanches, or lost in blizzards. Working together, one dog would dig and alert while the other returned to guide the monks. It was systematic, and it worked. Barry der Menschenretter, Barry the People Rescuer, is the most famous individual from this era, credited with locating over 40 people during his working life between 1800 and 1812. He was not, importantly, the massive, jowly dog we picture today. He was leaner, lighter, built for endurance over raw bulk. The Alpine Mastiff at the Hospice was a working mountain dog, not a show animal. The naming history here is genuinely confusing, and it's worth untangling. English travelers visiting Switzerland in the early 19th century encountered these dogs at the Hospice and needed something to call them. The monks didn't have a breed name, they called them their dogs, or named them individually. So the English did what the English do and gave them a descriptive label. They were huge. They looked like mastiffs. They lived in the Alps. Alpine Mastiff. Simple as that. Other names floated around. Hospice dogs, Barry dogs, Swiss Alpine dogs, mountain dogs. But Alpine Mastiff stuck in British popular consciousness. Partly thanks to a painting by a 17-year-old Edwin Landseer in 1820 titled Alpine Mastiffs Reanimating a Distressed Traveller, which showed two of the hospice dogs attending an unconscious avalanche victim. That painting made these dogs famous in Britain overnight. It also, incidentally, invented the brandy barrel, a whimsical detail Landseer added for visual effect, which the public then decided must be true. But here's where things get complicated. The dogs at the hospice were not standing still genetically. To recover numbers after disease and a series of brutal winters nearly wiped out the Hospice population, the monks and surrounding breeders introduced Newfoundland Blood, Great Dane, and other large breeds. The result, over several decades, was a heavier, longer-coated dog, more recognizable to modern eyes, and what would eventually be formally named the St. Bernard in 1880 by the Swiss Kennel Club. The St. Bernard we know today is a product of that 19th century blending. The original Alpine Mastiff type, purer and older, was something different. And then there's the English connection. The Alpine Mastiff didn't just contribute to the St. Bernard. It appears to have been a significant ancestor of the modern English Mastiff. A dog named Couchez, brought from the Alps to Britain in the early 19th century, is recorded as one of the important contributors to English Mastiff bloodlines, during a period when that breed was itself in serious decline. William Cavendish, the 5th Duke of Devonshire, is believed to have kept Alpine Mastiffs at Chatsworth House, one of the great aristocratic estates of England. These were not obscure, forgotten animals at the time. They were remarkable dogs that attracted the attention of wealthy breeders who understood what they were looking at. In 1829, the dog writer M.B. Wynne recorded the exhibition of a vast, brindle Alpine Mastiff named Lammy, brought from the Great St. Bernard area and shown in London and Liverpool as the largest dog in England. Think about that for a moment. This was a public spectacle. People queued to see this animal, and within a generation, the type had effectively ceased to exist in pure form. What killed it? Not neglect, not catastrophe. Irony, really. The Alpine Mastiff was absorbed by its own success. Crossbreeding to produce ever larger, ever more impressive descendants pulled the original type in too many directions at once. The Hospice dogs became St. Bernards. The British dogs fed into the English Mastiff revival. Nobody was breeding specifically to preserve what had existed before. By the mid-19th century, the original landrace had dissolved into its offspring. There may be a footnote survivor. In the Alpine regions where these dogs once lived and worked, a rare mountain dog called the Khan Garuf, sometimes called the Partua, has been documented by Molosser researchers as a possible descendant of the original Alpine Mastiff type. Whether it truly carries that ancient lineage or is simply a regional variant of similar ancestry is difficult to say, but it's a thread worth pulling. The Alpine Mastiff left no direct line to follow, no surviving breed to study. What it left instead is something more structural, the foundation underneath breeds that millions of people know and love today. Every time someone looks at an English Mastiff or St. Bernards and notices that particular combination of enormous size, calm authority, and clear loyalty, they're looking at something the Alps helped shape, long before anyone gave it a name. The mountains built that dog, and the dog built everything that came after it.